Hello and welcome to Thrive On, the podcast all about human flourishing and everything that goes with it. We'll be meeting those helping others and contributing to connection, not separation. These are exciting times, folks, where science, mysticism, technology, spirituality and creativity are recognizing their symmetry. We're in for a bumpy ride as we awaken, but we're here for each other and for you. So let's raise each other up and question everything. You can support us by purchasing our merch of self-worth and send a message to the others to let them know that you're switched on too. Link below or go to the website thriveonandoffline.com/merch. Nicki Wells, aka Turia, singer, songwriter, and composer. Nicki has a hypnotic and enchanting voice that seems to emanate from ancient mysticism and many far-off lands. She has an outstanding capacity for interpreting and embodying the complex beauty of Indian classical ragas and slokas, as well as Arabic inflections, and her cadence is memorable and beautiful. As Nitin Sawhney said, she is blessed with an unparalleled memory for melody and vocal techniques from virtually any culture. Nicki is able to leap from folk to French hip-hop, deep gospel, jazz or choral vocals to Indian classical, Arabic inflections, as if all were emanating from her soul. Nicki, for me, has had an amazing journey, from scores to documentaries and films, as well as performances at the Royal Opera House, Royal Albert Hall, and the main Pyramid Stage at Glastonbury. She is the soundtrack of so many of my personal practices and classes. And if you check her out on Instagram, she's forever working and collaborating with outstanding artists. But she's the epitome of global generosity and authenticity when it comes to her craft. Nicki, welcome to Thrive On. I have to say,
unbelievable introduction.
This is like a massive thing for me because you really are the voice of so many of my practices. And when you said yes, I was like, I ran into my husband. I was like, she said yes.
Oh, but that's so sweet. Well, it's my pleasure, honestly.
Really, thank you for taking the time. So, Nicki, I guess I would like to. The first question I'd like to ask you is about your name, Turia. I currently read a lot about the Vedas. I'm very interested in Vedanta and the intertwining of Sankhya and yoga. And I was wondering, because Turia has a few translations, and I came across one the other day that mentioned the substance of forms, so what moves within all forms. And I just wondered what made you embrace that name and what does it mean for you?
Well, that's a great question. Well, yeah, as you say, the word Turiya has many different meanings. And the one that kind of resonated with me the most was the description that it is the silence one experiences after sound. In particular, it derives from the Om. So the Om, the actual syllable of Om can be dissected into 4 dimensions: the A, the U, the M, and then the 4th dimension is silence that one experiences after uttering Om correctly. And that silence is the 4th state, known as Chatura. Also, beyond waking, dreaming, and dreamless, after all of those 3 states of consciousness is, again, the Chatura, the 4th state of Turiya. So what really kind of resonated with me was that this word represents silence after sound, or it could be the spaces between movement, the space between letters. And I wanted silence to represent the sound that I create, so that when people listen to it, they're left in silence, not to be left with a chattering mind or a chattering heart. but to actually be left with a peaceful, deep stillness. And that's when I thought, wow, this word means so much, and I wanted it to represent the sound of what I create musically.
That's beautiful. So it sounds to me as if you have organically, through your life and your journey here, you've organically become a Nada yogi. You've kind of, the sound after silence. And we quite, when we talk about, when I'm mentioning the yoga lineages, I don't want to label it, but it's lovely to hear you say that in the real sense, that's how you arrived at that, rather than kind of with an intention from the beginning, but from your life's journey, that's how you arrived at that point. Is beautiful.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, I think silence is as important as the sound itself, and they are intertwined, and it's the journey of both movement and stillness, and the journey of silence and sound. That is what life is. But we don't give credit to stillness, we don't, as much as movement, we don't give credit to silence as much as sound, because that's what's more perhaps intrusive, or perhaps more visceral in our lives. And so I'm more interested in the canvas of life, or the projector screen of the movie, or the silence that is the canvas of sound, and that for me is the foundation of being, of life. And yet we always come back to stillness, we always come back to silence. That's the foundation of our movement and our sound, essentially. So so that's what really
our lives,
absolutely, yeah.
Cyclical, which
yeah,
obviously is what you do as well, the cycles of sound, and as you're saying, the silence, but also the round nature of the mathematical essence of music as well. And the way that you're describing it, like it's the as you say, the canvas, but the space that allows then for one to, even with the mind, just to contemplate. We don't often allow ourselves to step away from the friction and just really start to feel why we're here. Like, we're coming up to this winter solstice, aren't we? And there's a lot of talk about setting certain things, but I often find, when I look at someone like yourself, and I'm sure you go through all kinds of things in life, as we all do, but when a soul has really lived its purpose and is aligned, and what that looks like really inspires the people around you, and the ripples that it creates for other people to be brave enough to be still and think, is this really what my soul wants to do? Because it's only when you can stop and sit in that silence that you start to be able to align yourself with why you're here. I think this just nicely leads me into, how did it all begin for you? Because I know that, did you grow up in India, or?
Yes, I did. I mean, how did life begin, or how did my journey begin?
How did your love of Indian culture in the nature of sound and philosophy begin to you? When did you start to really think, oh, hang on a minute? Because I can't imagine that it's with Indian philosophy, it kind of comes in anyway with the culture, but I'm
absolutely
interested.
Well, I'd say it's quite a clear answer, actually, because my parents met in a meditation practice, which was based on ancient Vedic philosophies.
Wow.
And so I was born into it with my sisters, with a lot of my cousins from the Swiss side of my family. And that's what initially made us go to this international boarding school at the foothills of the Himalayas in Himachal Pradesh,
Wow.
where all my cousins went as well. And it was a bit of a kind of family expedition, but there were 400 kids from around the world who all went to this school. And the ethos of it was, and it was a brave decision on the parents' part, but the ethos of it was to essentially allow their children to grow up with spiritual foundations rather than a more Western material foundation, whereby we would wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and meditate before the academic classes. And it was in such an incredible setting at the foothills of the Himalayas, where you were surrounded by these white peaks and then Indian jungle. And it was an incredibly inspiring environment to grow up in from the ages of 6 till 10. I was there. Some kids went there from when they were 6 to 16, or even I think that was the full age that you could be there. And so growing up in this meditation practice, which is Sahaja Yoga, I'm not sure if you've heard of that. So it incorporates a lot of Indian culture within. So, I mean, for example, when we would meditate, there'd normally be Indian classical music like Hari Prasad Chaurasia or Shiv Kumar Sharma playing, or, you know, vocalists like Ustad Rashid Khan or Pandit Jasraj, various Indian classical musicians that would enable a state of meditation. And so this is something that I've kind of grown up with as part of an integrated culture. The culture that is Sahaja Yoga is basically universal. There is no one particular culture, although Indian culture is certainly predominant. But that's very much the India from I would say pre-independence, or 1930s India, whereby the innocence, the values that are inherently Indian, not necessarily the modern, more westernized culture that is today. So those are the kind of values and foundations that I grew up with, very much inspired by, the poetry of Rabindranath Tagore, poetry of Kabir, basically looking at all of the incredible souls and sages from Guru Nanak even to Muhammad Sahib, spirituality in a universal way, even Buddha, even Christianity. So basically the roots of all of these spiritual schools before they became essentially corrupt by human ego, and how we could incorporate the essences of those teachings within ourselves. And that's what was the kind of teaching that I grew up with, really. So it's a very universal approach.
So it's like the real essence of the Hindu darshan, as in, it's for you to work it out for yourself. But it essentially is all one, and that Santana Dharma kind of thread running through it all. What an amazing experience. So those ragas and poetry is in your DNA, essentially. I mean, really, it is in your DNA.
I mean, I think it's interesting because I'm half Swiss, half English, but I'm certainly not really associated with my nationality at all. I'm more kind of, I was recently in India last week, and I kind of just get absorbed into the culture, where I really just start to think in Hindi or dream in the phonetics of the dialect and all the mannerisms, and it all kind of or wherever I am. I mean, I lived in Australia for a bit and suddenly became Australian, or if I'm in Italy, I'll become Italian. So it's this whole idea of not being attached to one way of being or one nationality or any country. It's just about being a human being in the most integrated sense, and having loving compassion for all human beings, and finding the non-separation with all of us. Do you know what I mean? Which of course at these times, I mean, everything is so, it's coming towards this boiling point politically, and you know, this whole kind of fear of making, you know, this idea of the other and separating. You know, it's a very scary time, actually, a very scary world we're living in at the moment. But yeah.
I'm totally. I think I listened to an interview that you did on another podcast, and it was bizarre because I'd had a conversation with someone here, and she reminded me of the mantra, "The guest is God," and I was really starting to feel inside of my own practice that I was becoming a little bit separatist in the way that I was thinking. I'd gone too far, you know, into ways that I was presenting the information to myself. You know, I'd run away with it, like you were saying, my ego was there. And it was really lovely hearing you in the podcast, because I decided to do this because I could feel this crunchiness coming in, and I was feeling quite, you know, solid, and well, they think this and I think that, and it's just so nonsensical. You know, it's just so, you know, the ridiculousness, because the human being and consciousness and collective consciousness can easily be played upon. And so it's great to know that, you know, we're all inside of ourselves thinking the same thing. We're all connected. And I wanted to ask you, when you are feeling those times when it could possibly wash over you, the fear and, you know, the climate and the consciousness of certain nations, or, you know, is it through the music that you reconnect, or what is it that reminds you? I don't want to kind of get into practices too much, but I'm just curious.
I would say it's something incredibly simple. Like, for example, every morning I walk my dog in the park, and just starting the day walking in the nature is a reset for me. Something very humbling about just walking amongst trees and starting the day in a space of surrendering anything that's in my mind, thoughts or stresses or things that I even have to do that are important, to just have a moment of like, you know what, I'm just going to have this moment of just inhaling and exhaling and enjoying the cold wind and looking at the grass and looking at the trees and being there. And something as simple as that is incredibly nourishing for me. And of course, music is I mean, it's an entire journey. So wherever, for example, today I've just been doing music the whole day. I'm doing this new contemporary dance show, and it's kind of like having infinite keys that open into new doors, and you can really get lost in it, and it takes you to an entirely new world, and you have no idea where you're going to be once you start opening those doors. So there's nothing kind of predestined. It's just about being on a flow and starting with a very open, clear space, clear mind, and allowing yourself to be taken by that flow to wherever you need to be, and following your own intuition and instinct to kind of guide yourself through that process. And that could be through art, it could be through music, it could be through yoga, it could be through just business as well, and your day and going through your day. But I think it is about your initial approach and how you approach things, or, you know, not in an attacking way or in a stressed way, but in a kind of more from an underneath approach means that you're never really kind of what's the word when you're...
You mean you're more kind of thoughtful in your contemplative rather than reacting?
Yeah, well, nothing has a power over you in the sense you kind of just enjoying the moment, and you know, it doesn't need to be such a stressful thing. I mean, there's so much that can be stressful in life, absolutely. But I guess it's about our approach to it rather than, you know, having a fear about it or an anxiety that then creates dis-ease and disease, you know. So yeah,
I wanted to talk, as we're just teetering on the edge of presence here. So because okay, you've got the from an outsider looking in, one might look at what you do and just think, wow, even the thought of that is terrifying. But it is what you do. So beyond that point, what I really wanted to ask you about, talking about you when you're singing. Here where I am, I have the Hindu temple and I have the Muslim temple. And what I noticed between the two is this thing that I really hear in your voice as well, is this yearning, this almost Sufi-like, and this, when you're singing, what you're singing to, or whether you're totally lost in the moment, is so outstandingly beautiful. I know that you can't dissect it in the way that the observer does, which is why some of us are here to appreciate and some of us are here just doing it. But where are you in those moments where I hear this amazing song to whatever?
I think for me, what I'm really interested in, and I've in my own practice, I've been in a way, it's like practicing devalidation, in the sense of where my identity or my name, Nicki Wells, and my egoic self gets dissolved in the whole. And through music, it's quite easy to get there, because you're riding that wave. You're so kind of you're focused, but then you're also emotionally connected, and then you just get usurped and you get lost in it. And for me, that's when I'm home, and that's where I want to be. I have done lots of performances as well when I'm in the mind, and it's a bit contrived, and it's in the egoic self, and then it's not quite the performance. It's not that kind of satisfying where your heart has been relinquished. It's so I think my aim for when I am singing is to be dissolved in the music, or dissolved in the whole, and whereby my identity in my mind almost becomes non-existent, and I'm just lost in that space, or in that time, in that moment. And that for me is really where I can say that's my kind of purpose to be,
and honor that kind of space, like an ecstatic poet, I would almost,
like the Sufis, for example, with Qawwali singers, or in Sufi music, it's all about that. It's about the mysticism, and in all mystics, in all mystical cultures from around the world, even the Gnostics, or the Sufis, and even someone like William Blake, who was a mystic. It's to be like an internal child, where you're constantly curious, and you're constantly open to receive. And I think when we close those kind of channels of communication, when we are basically in the mind or in the ego, because that's just pretty much the only rock. Otherwise, you're just there, and you're just enjoying and floating along, like flying like a bird. And we all have the capability to do it. It's just about surrendering, and letting go of our kind of conditionings and our fears and our desires to be validated, or to be seen, or to be successful, or to be, all of these things are just such myths. So yeah.
I'm going to talk. This is curious for me, just the technical side of things, because again, when I found out that we would be chatting, I was like, okay, I would like to find out a little bit more about how this is constructed, and I was really interested in some of the Sanskrit or Hindu terms for the ornamentation. And when one thinks of how you perform and the way that you do is it the chalan or the drift and the flow? Just when you were learning the music, so how long did it take you? Was it something that came naturally to you, or obviously when you're performing and you're in the moment, but when you were practicing, as you were taking this gift that you'd been given and honing it down, how did you eventually learn for that to become second nature?
I think it was something that is definitely a natural ability. I think all of us are born with certain tendencies. Like, say, someone may have a very mathematical mind. I certainly don't. And someone might have a talent for cooking, or a talent for music. And I think since I was a child, I've always had music in my mind, and always been singing. So it's almost like an extra limb. When I started singing Indian classical music properly, I went to a music academy a couple of hours out from Mumbai, in a place called Thane, and learned the basic foundations there. And I was only there for 2 months. Wow. But the kind of immersion that took place in that music academy gave me the entire backbone and foundation of what I know today. And in fact, the shlokas that I've just released on this album, I learned there. And then everything else I've kind of just absorbed through immersion, orally, just by listening. And that, for me, the tradition of Indian classical music is oral. You don't write anything down as you would in the West. And that's kind of how I learn music, is by orally, or I would hear things and then it kind of comes into fruition. And that's kind of how it works to me.
That is amazing. I mean, that is a real gift. So when you're there was something else that I really loved as well, which is they called the vista, which is when you begin slowly and you're kind of telling the story about what is about to happen. Can you explain that to people? Because quite often when we're listening to these things, we don't know why it has this slow beginning and things like that. I'd just like to hear you explain.
Yeah, sure. The slow beginnings are normally known as alap. And there are different movements within a rag, and the alap is about unraveling the notes, introducing, like you say, what will come. And raga means mood or color, and so when we're kind of introducing maybe 2 or 3 notes, we're kind of introducing what the mood is going to be. So, for example, if I were to just go, So you're just kind of starting to paint with whatever notes the raga kind of demands. And there are certain rules. You cannot just do what you want. There is a framework. So for example, there is a very specific ascending and descending line of a rag that or a certain way that you approach various notes determine what rag it is, and so that gives it the kind of framework that makes it classical. If you go away from that framework, then it becomes what they call fusion, and it's no longer a classical piece, because that's a very kind of it's a spine, it's a framework. And so when we do the alap, it's very much about unraveling those flavors, those the flavors that you're going to. It's like eating food. You're like you smell it first, maybe, or you look at it first, and it determines what it might taste like. And so that's what the alap is.
Wow, like my whole body is just like gone like amazing. When, as it unravels, and you are having this moment now where you are in this relationship with your fellow musicians, and I know it's not just Indian classical music, as I mentioned earlier, but you're in these amazing auditoriums or in a small intimate space, and you're having this relationship with the musicians, and you're having the relationship with the people listening, and you see the interconnective entanglement of that moment. How is that for you afterwards or during?
That's a wonderful question. I think ultimately it's a language, isn't it? Music is a language, and we're communicating sometimes without words, without lyrics, sometimes without form. So it's a language of communication that people can feel. There's one thing that I really loved are these two words, anahata and ahata. And in Nada Brahma, or sound knowledge, there is this idea that a musician is like a channel, and there are inaudible notes in the atmosphere, and their job is to catch these inaudible notes, which are known as anahata, and then usurp them in their being, and then make them heard as ahata. And so it's that idea that everyone can feel music in form and without form, and that's why it has such an emotional impact on our beings, and also on us spiritually, really. And emotionally, music is like an arrow that just penetrates into the heart, sometimes more than words can do, because it's just soul stirring. And so just to be involved with other musicians who challenge me to be better, and who ask me questions musically in performance, who keep me on my toes. I mean, they are really like my gurus, They're like, it's a wonderful communication, and also a learning ground to challenge myself more, in the moment of creating music with them.
And the resonance, as you say, the musical resonance is that real language of the soul and the atoms tingling, and these things that remind us that we're not solid. I want to take you back in time a little bit again, because I can't not have this conversation without talking about you with Nitin and how you met. Because again, this seems to be the soundtrack to so many yoga experiences. And the first time I heard your voice, how did that happen? How did you meet? What was that like for you the first time? Because I know you've worked with him since and you're working with him now. And I want to talk about the other great people you're working with. But for now, can you just tell us about Nitin?
Sure. Well, I was 16. I was living in Australia at the time, in Sydney. And the first time I ever heard his music was when I was in a music class in Sydney, and we had to analyze these excerpts of music. And all of a sudden Homelands comes on, you know, with these cinematic strings. And then this Qawwali voice breaking out, and I'm like, sat up in my chair as I was listening to this music thinking, who's making music like this? And all of a sudden my past of living in India and then living in the West, you know, was married so elegantly in this manner. And I was like, okay, I need to find out who's making this kind of music. And then I got into his music, and I remember sitting on a train on the way to school as I was listening to his music on my iPod. And I remember thinking, I remember noticing on the artwork of his albums that he had featured vocalists. And I remember looking out at the view of the train and thinking, oh, I'd love to one day be a featured vocalist on one of his albums. And I looked at the tree.
Talk about setting an intention.
Yeah, exactly. And there was this very kind of, as I thought about that, there was this tree in the distance that I was looking at. And then 5 years later, I had met him in London when I was working with a producer called Pete Boxter Martin, whose studio was opposite Nitin's. And he told him about me, the fact that I love Indian classical music. And so he came into the studio and heard me sing a shaloka. And then 5 years from the point of when I was 16, we actually had a gig. He invited me on to join his band. And then we had a gig in Sydney. And then we just got off the plane, the whole band, and everyone was completely jet lagged. And I was so buzzed to be back that I just hopped on a train to see some of my friends. Everyone went to the hotel to crash, and I sat on this train really excited to see my friends, and it happened to be the same train on the way to school. And all of a sudden, boom, I see this tree, and then the memory comes back to me like a boomerang.
Wow.
Or in my haze of jet lag, thinking, oh my gosh, and the memory, I had lost it, you know. And then all of a sudden I saw that tree, and then it came back to me that I had a desire to one day work with him, and there I was in his band working with him. So it was quite a very incredible kind of meeting of two musical beings, which I think, you know, was meant to be in that way. Yeah,
it definitely sounds like it was meant to be. You know, it sounds like how it was, you know, it just really works. Since then you've gone on to write and compose scores for film, and in particular what I found really interesting is this work that you are doing, that you did with Sadler's Wells or any dance companies. When I see that you are, I'm always intrigued by how that process happens. So you've got all this movement and fluidity and choreographed story, and then you are working with them. How does that unfold? It may differ from project to project, but how does that unfold for you personally?
I think it's very much about me getting a very strong intuitive feeling about what is needed musically, and you know, I really have to sacrifice anything that I want to do, and it's more about serving the whole, in the sense. So, for example, the narrative of what the piece is about, and the particular sonic palette that needs to be the colors of the piece, the emotional subconscious of the piece is what the music will provide. So I guess what I really do is just hone in intuitively to see what actually needs to be done musically. And I've been working with Akash Udedra for the past 7 years, and we have an amazing working relationship where we kind of know how each other works, and he will kind of choreograph a piece. He'll kind of leave me to my own devices, and then we kind of meet in the middle. I'll create a piece, and depending on how he feels when he's dancing to it, I might make some tweaks, or it can even just may not completely work, and then I'll just be fine to just, you know, start again and do something else. So it's really not about being attached to anything that we create, but it's really about painting, you know, and just and really kind of seeing what how the music will enhance the narrative, how the music will enhance the emotional the emotional spine on stage, you know, the movement that is happening, and how the music will be a subconscious feeling that the audience can then kind of tap into. Do you see what I mean? It's a very it's very intuitive, basically.
And again, I'm seeing this, your prior childhood teaching of non-attachment and moving with the flow of life is coming out again, even in your creative process, you know, just allowing rather than insisting that things are a particular.
About discovering and unraveling, you know, and that there's a really fun process to that, of trying new sounds. I mean, it's heaven for me to kind of just have a palette of sounds and try different things, and all of a sudden sometimes I listen to things and I think, did I really make that? And I have no idea where things will go. And so it's kind of allowing yourself to be curious, and to and sometimes, of course, you know, you get no sleep and you're working all night, and there's, you know, lots of deadlines and it's a lot of work. But it doesn't feel like work, because you're really enjoying the creative process, and you know, it's really exciting.
When it comes to the industry, because you're working with or you've worked on a film with Anushka Shankar, another outstanding musician, but you are a woman, and I was just curious, as I don't want to say it's a man's world and patriarchy and all that, so I don't know if I often think it's about perception. But is there a feeling that feels different, that there's more of an allowance now, and the working with women and seeing women taking a lead role?
I mean, I really think, you know, women really seem to be at the forefront of our popular culture at the moment. You know, you look at films, they're all lead women, you know, they're all based on women. There's now, you know, this film Little Women coming out, and Emma, for example, I just saw another advert. There's so many kind of powerful lead roles that are female. In the music world, I've never really felt at all any misogyny. In fact, I've really felt more encouragement for, you know, female composers, that to be encouraged. I mean, even how I got this studio, the owner who I rent it from was really happy to give it to me as a female producer and composer, and so there is more an encouragement, I think, then any kind of resistance. Oh, 1 second. So I don't think there's been any
nothing that was overcome, but more of a sense of things are changing maybe now.
I think so. I mean, I really feel there's a big kind of feminine power movement happening on a subtle level. I mean, of course, there will always be, that there's still a lot of work we need to do as a whole society to overcome misogyny and conflict. And I did this play called The Pink Sari Revolution, which is directed by Ziba. And, it was all about, a lot of violence and discrimination against women, and this gang of 20,000 women in Uttar Pradesh who march against violence against women. And there's appalling things that happen every single day. I mean, disgusting. And so those can't be overseen, and we need to raise our voices. And this play very much raises awareness about things like that happen every day. And we were looking at newspapers, and every day there was another young girl that was raped and abused. And so there's still so much that needs to change. But I do think, all in all, especially in the West, there is this movement of a woman standing up in her own dignity and her own power, not a power of a power to compete, not a power to compete in a kind of proving yourself, but just a confidence and a wisdom that we all have, which is more intuitive, and a respect for that, which hasn't been the case for hundreds of years. And I think it's because there's a lot of fear about a woman's power, which is ultimately very kind of deep and intuitive, and that's probably very intimidating, So I think it's about how we also support each other as women, and how we can all be a good example of integration and compassion, and not have this competitive or sharper energy that is ultimately destructive.
Yeah, I think we're even amongst women ourselves, I feel that it's becoming more familial, like it's feeling less competitive in that sense. I know I'm getting older, so I think that kind of happens, you just really like, you kind of relax into yourself, and for some people it happens sooner than others, and I appreciate that. But I am really enjoying this kind of new, like you say, non-threatening, but this new camaraderie that women seem to have with each other as well, that by sharing and raising each other up and bringing this awareness and realizing how we can help other women, and as you say, young girls and children, is a really wonderful time to be in. And I think that art and music can always reflect things back to consciousness, to the world, better than necessarily just because of the format that we're speaking about. How does it feel when you see that light bulb moment for people? Because historians and journalists have their roles, but then the artist has its role. And how does it feel?
Well, I think artists do have a massive responsibility to be daring and to actually stand up for things that are not right. And music has always gone hand in hand with things like politics, and, like, for example, the civil rights movement. James Brown, Aretha Franklin, Nina Simone, they were very much conscious of what was happening at the times, and they were anthemic in their music and gave so much power to the people. And I think in a way, you know, I don't want to do things aggressively because I don't believe in that energy, but there has to be a certain amount of waking up to what is actually happening, and then trying to figure out what one can offer, what can one give to ameliorate society or the situation. And you know what, you know, that's why I kind of really have been interested in this idea of the power of silence and sound, you know, rather than making more noise. You know, it's to have a more kind of a contrasting, you know, to have a magnet of, if everything is positive, you need some negative. And so this idea of focusing on inner silence and how music can facilitate that within people is something I'm quite interested in.
And waking up to the truth of who we are, you know, the you know, love, and not in the romantic sense, but that heartfelt connection is the flip side of, you know, one, you know, you have but in the passive resistance, which I always found Gandhi such a fascinating character, and, you know, all kinds of things went on there, but in the way that he demonstrated that was really quite a feminine aspect, in the way that he walked all those kilometers and then harvested the salt from the sea, I found was gestural rather than, you know, kind of revolutionary in that sense. It was the power of the very quiet gesture, which I think in the music that you do is bringing people into, because it's in those quiet moments where we realize the egos kind of, and all the little things that we get tied up in, as well as the big things.
Absolutely. And it's really hard to be silent, actually. But you know, if we look at someone like Gandhi or someone like Martin Luther King or someone like Abraham Lincoln, when they gravitated towards a truth, they stood by it and they practiced what they preached. And that's very different. And that's why they're seen as such, you know, revered and heroic figures today, is because they were very disciplined in their truth. But I think
it's having those, yes, as you say, it's that centeredness, it's that stillness again, isn't it? Where your principles are, where you can quietly say, no, I don't, you know, I don't think so. I don't, you know, and it's from, and when you operate from that space of stillness, people can sense it in you, you know, and nature can sense it in you and your environment. Just a side note, but how was it working on Mowgli?
It was brilliant, yeah.
I was thinking about nature, and then I thought, oh, I'm going to have to go off piece, because I loved that film.
You love that film? Yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it? I was asked by Nitin to come in, and I initially sung the song that Frida Pinto sings to Mowgli in the film, which is what are in the end credits as well, and then did a few bits here and there on the score vocally, and it's such a beautiful film.
How was it working with? Was the animation there beforehand, or was that? Yeah.
The score was written after the animation. It was a post-production thing, and I mean, you know, it's such a brilliant cast. And meeting Andy Serkis, he's just such a lovely man. He's just really, every time I see him, he's just he's so warm and very very open and likable. So you know, I mean, it was just great to be part of a production like that, and funnily enough, I met Benedict Cumberbatch quite recently, and Kate Blanchett, who's also in the film. So it seems that, you know, the universe kind of brings people together in interesting ways, but or crossing paths. So yeah, it was really fun to be part of such a project.
Yeah, and it seems that well, I guess I bring it up because we do have things that happen in the world, but there is also this kind of, which I think you demonstrate really well, as well as your graciousness. It's the lightheartedness, you know, the playfulness of existence and the lightheartedness. So I, you know, that's why I wanted to just touch on that, because that is part of the dance, you know, and even when you're singing, can you explain maybe a little bit about that lightness of spirit and that non-attachment and how you bring it into the voice?
Wow. Well, I think, you know, life is like a play. You know, they call it Leela, really, whereby, you know, when we realize, you know, we're kind of living in what seems to be like a computer simulated reality, then it's all just actually fun and games. And you're like, oh, well, why take it all so bloody seriously? Do you know what I mean? So there's this kind of a real funness to be had in life. And I just think, you know, we don't want to walk around, you know, grumpy and like taking ourselves too seriously. It's about, I think, having this childlike playfulness, as you say, to any given situation, because it brings also joy to others. If you're in a working environment and you've got a lot of work to do, obviously it's not about fun and games and you have to get work done, but the attitude and approach should be that of a lightness and that of a you know, giving joy to others in whatever way we can. And, you know, of course, life is going to give us our challenges and make us stressed. And sometimes it's not all about constantly being in this joyful place. And sometimes it's about going into a deep, sometimes dark place of growth and of churning and of realization and of, you know, facing oneself in a very sometimes even a brutal way or a vulnerable way. So it's not always about lightness. There's also an element of darkness needed. But I think, just to not take oneself too seriously is a really good thing, because you know, we're all here to learn. You know, we're all here to learn, and we all need to be open and receptive to learn. Do you know what I mean? And we can't learn if we're constantly rigid and solid. It's probably the same with yoga. You can't go deeper in an asana or deeper in a pose if you've already got this kind of tension in the body. When you allow yourself to just let go, it will open and then you'll go deeper into that stretch or something. And that's the same with,
well, it kind of, it happens in meditation, doesn't it? And if you presuppose what the perfection, you know, well, last time in meditation this happened, so I would hope that I would experience the same, if not an evolved state. And then you're wrestling just with the fact that you can't get comfortable. I always find that makes me inner smile. You know, maybe initially when I did take myself too seriously, I'd be like, you know, buying into the idea that would mean any level, because there are no levels. There's just the moment, and all you're ever tackling is what you're presented with at any given time.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we're constantly got tennis balls flying at us and we're constantly hitting them away, but then it becomes quite comical
Mm.
You know what I mean? Rather than stressful, you start to be like, this is actually quite ridiculous and really fun. and I think, you know, so challenges can be like that. Just laugh at a challenge and be like, okay, bring it on. Let's see, you know.
And how do you are you one of these people that can have lots of projects going on at once? Are you quite naturally a person who works well when there's a lot going on, or do you need to take time out afterwards? What's your creative cycle like?
Well, at the moment, it is all literally like 20 tennis balls flying at once. And I compartmentalize my career. So, you know, I am a composer, I am a singer. I'm also very much, it's a multifaceted career. So it's basically a lot of time management involved. You know, a few days ago, I was in India. Today, I'm in the studio doing contemporary dance. You know, and then I'm also catching up on things like, you know, just the bureaucracy of emails, and then sorting out, you know, websites I'm building. And yeah, there's always a to-do list, basically. But I think, you know, what I try to do is do things in a measured way and time manage my day, time manage my week. You know, and I think that takes experience. I'm not very good at it. I could still do better. I'm thinking, oh, I need a PA. You know? Yeah. But then, you know, I'm trying to do it all myself. I'm trying to juggle. I'm doing the best that I can. It's probably not the best it could be. And I won't know that until I'm better, and then realize, oh, you know, I've actually improved. You know what I mean? So I can only just do what I can do in the present, and hope for the best. And sometimes we do fail as well. Sometimes we can't reach those goals, and I think it's not about being hard on yourself, but just remaining focused, remaining centered, and having a very pure awareness about yourself, really. I mean, ultimately, this all boils down to awareness, really. I met this incredible nun who's a Buddhist nun, and she spent 12 years in a cave. She was at Varna, where I just was, and
wow.
And she spent 12 years in a cave in complete solitary confinement, and has really gone up in the ranks of Buddhism, to a point that she's very respected nun now. And I asked her a question, you know, how does one stay in a state of meditation? And her answer was, one does not stay in a state of meditation. You're not walking around in complete samadhi all the time, though, of course, you know, when those who are realized are just in a constant state of pure awareness. They have a pure awareness and a very awakened awareness about themselves and about everything that's unraveling in the present moment. They're watching, they're witnessing. It's being the Sakshi, you know, how Shiva is. He is the ultimate witness. You know, he just watches. And so that's, I think it was a really wonderful answer, because there is this whole thing of, how do we climb higher? How do we get constantly? How do we go up? How do we go forward? How do we forget all of that? Just forget it. Forget the future. Forget this upward motion of what it is to be successful. We need more money. We need more love. We need constantly more. Forget all of it. Just be more present and more aware right now. And that's all you can really do and be. And, you know, suddenly that's the most relieving thing that gives you so much joy.
Yeah, that's lovely. I heard something similar the other day by Professor Edwin Bryant, who wrote a book recently, a commentary on the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. And he's Vedanta, but he did this commentary. And he said something that really touched me, and it was, he's not an enlightened being, obviously, so he's talking from not from practice per se, but I just thought it was really lovely what he said, that, you know, we've all got our samskaras. Be who you are. You know, that moment when you start trying to emulate or be something else, you know, and you're not really accepting. So you're in awareness of what your personality is actually like, rather than what it's aspiring to be. And in that moment, you can, you know, have that ready admittance of, you know, okay, you know, I could quite, so it's not labeling yourself, but giving your, because I think, you know, I guess what I'm edging towards with you is that authenticity and surrender isn't going to well, it doesn't feel as easy if you can't just front up and say, this is like how I'm feeling even now, or this is where, you know I need work. How do you how is it that you stay in awareness and kind of go, okay, hi there, you, I recognize you?
Well, I think there are moments for it, and there's a time and place. Do you know what I mean? It's not always available. Sometimes when you're really in the thick of it and you're working and you're in the hustle and bustle, it might not be the right time and place to be in that kind of state. So I think there are moments of the day where that allow for that to take place. Like, for example, when I'm walking my dog in the morning, you know, or when I wake up and I'll sit down and meditate. And that's time for me. That's time to kind of, you know, have a that's my spiritual practice, you know. It's and then of course you go on with the day and you're in the tube and you're in London, and you know, London is a really you know, energetic place, you know, with millions of people and running around and a rat race, and I think what I find more interesting is, rather than being, you know, on a rock in the Himalayas attaining one's enlightenment, is to be in the circus, you know, to be right in the chaos and then find that peace and that stillness and that love and that compassion, and that looking at a stranger in Oxford Street and just feeling love for them. Do you know what I mean? That's what's more interesting for me, rather than kind of detaching yourself from it, or to find that the reality in the chaos, you know. That's really for me what it's all about. And I think, you know, there's definitely moments of self-reflection and of self-inquiry, and of witnessing oneself, that constantly there have to be these kind of inner eyes that are always there. Sometimes you're not sometimes it's not you know, switched on, and then sometimes boom, you're really there. And I think just allow yourself to be there. And there are so many catalysts that help me go there. At the moment, for example, I'm reading this book, Carl Jung's Dreams, Memories and Reflections, and last night I was on the tube reading it, and it just got to such an incredible point that left me in awe. And there I am, you know, surrounded by people in rush hour, but within myself, just through reading his words and his experiences, it facilitated for me to go in a deeper state. Do you see what I mean? So whether it's a book, or whether it's music, or whether it's a film, or, for example, a BBC documentary on nature that is so awe-inspiring, it can actually facilitate those you know, deeper, more meditative states.
So like it can be Tantra, using the, you know, as they do with the Radiant Sutras, using all of life to to mirror back to you the reason of existence.
Yeah. And that's what music is as well. Music is not apart from life at all. When I met with one of my heroes, Kaushika Chakrabarti, she's an incredible singer, and her father, who is, you know, probably the best Indian classical vocal teacher in the world now. I met him 2 years ago, and then he invited me to come to his school in Kolkata, and she told me, Kaushiki said that her rag Yaman, which is a particular rag, will be different every day that she sings it. You know, there's not a particular rag Yaman that you just sing. It will be different when you're 15, and then it will be different when you're 30, and it will be different when you're 45. So you bring to the music your own life experiences, your own emotional palette, your own pain. And that's a really important word as well, pain, and how that can give color to music, how that can give color to art. And we have to go through these things. We have to go through pain. And if everything was all, you know, sunshine, rainbows and daffodils, there wouldn't be necessarily the well-rounded substance that a human being can have, to have empathy for others and compassion for others, and to have more life experiences just adds to the richness of our character, I think, and our being.
Yeah, and the more we can see it all as part of existence, and also to recognize the humanity in each other, the more connection we feel to the oneness anyway. There's no, it doesn't have to be contrived. It just has to be felt, you know, that feeling of connection to whatever it is. And I think when you're going through those periods where you can feel quite isolated, you know, it is in that you can oftentimes sense the deepest meaning and the deepest purpose. You know, you kind of know that you're meant to be there. Feeling that way. Do you ever feel like that, where you're like, this is really tough right now, but I really know that I have to be here and stay with it?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm thinking about that, you know, even spiritually, I would say it could be karmic, you know, the way that someone needs to go through something, and it's very much their karma to go through, and then you realize with acceptance that your place is to be there. In fact, I wrote this song, which is going to be on my new album, which is all about this, this idea, and it's called I Have Longed to Be Here. And it's inspired by a lot of Bulgarian folk, which I'm really into at the moment.
Cool.
But the lyrics are, when night crosses day, all things go quiet and sway. When pain comes with its blow, all winds and currents know. But I have longed to be here, I have longed to be here. It's that idea that when we go through difficult times and when we're going through pain, I have longed to be here is almost like I have put myself in this position, and we are kind of walking in life, either consciously or unconsciously, we arrive wherever we are at. And so we have, whether we like it or not, have asked to be in that position, and have asked life to put us exactly where we are. Sometimes we walk into things maybe because we don't necessarily value ourselves enough, and suddenly we're in a position which reflects that lack of self-worth. And then that's an opportunity for us to reevaluate why that is the case, and to then give the healing and the self-love to grow out of that. Otherwise, we will go in the same cyclic repetition again and again and again until we learn to ascend out of it. And that's why I think it could be karmic, you know. So we have these real inner lessons to learn, and until we grow out of it, or we will just cyclically get the same
response.
You know, yeah.
And I think it's I totally agree with you, and I think that also once you can accept that situation and understand that, one thing that I noticed is that when I was going through some darker times, is that what I thought happened with things like love weren't necessarily the case. Once I'd started to really learn to say, what is the lesson, why am I here, why am I, what is it that I need to be shown? And then I started to see love as something that really was a choice, that really truly was a choice, in the energy and the prana went wherever you put it. But if you tried to think it's only for this, it's only for this, it's only for that situation or this situation, and then it has to stop. Like you were saying before, the disease, I felt the disease like the block, but when I was like, no, you can love them, you can love this person, you can love this animal, you can love this situation. It started, the energy moved more freely, the emotion and the energy was like, yes, that is what is meant to happen. It's not meant to just stop here. So in things like grief, it's not meant to just stop there. Once we realize that there's this you can love, and there is that you can love, and there's the memory that you can love, and then things aren't blocked, that they move. What are your thoughts on kind of prana and the movement of love as an expression?
On love as an expression?
Yeah, so like you were saying, what are your thoughts on love as an expression?
As in, like, what love are we talking about here? Just
any. So if I say love, I'm really meaning it as universal love, not as really as a romantic
I think
love.
There's so many different meanings of the word love, and some of them are quite derogatory of the term love in itself. Romantic love is something that is also quite limiting, and also very based on illusions, or our own desires and our illusions and our, also misidentifications. But, when we really love ourselves in an unconditional way, we have the capacity to love in general, everything and anything. And there's so many different veils of love, and I'm still just a student of it, really, of discovering what love is.
Would you say that you love your work and your projects? Is that that relationship that you have where you're like you're birthing, it's you're seeding it, you're birthing it out into the world, and then you're allowing others to share in your joy?
Yeah, it's passion. It's I guess creativity is love. But I mean, I kind of think love is like it is an ocean, isn't it? And it kind of it can be very very soft and very silent. And then there's something like a passionate love. Like when I'm really, for example, getting into my work, it's more of a kind of, it's more of a passion that I'm putting in, and a focus. And I think love is something that is maybe more like a mother nurturing love, or a more wiser love, I mean, I think in my life, I can say I'm probably still too young to really understand what love is, and I'm still very you know, I'm still kind of, you know, like a child looking up at the kind of kingdom of what love is, because I don't think I've experienced the fullness of it in its fullest extent. I think that's more to be unraveled in my life, and I can definitely say that I have experienced what love is, you know, from even just strangers, or you know, the love that I experience with my friends and family and loved ones. But I think there's so much dimension to it that I don't really think I've skimmed the surface of its capabilities. I think maybe in the deepest sense it would be spiritually, if I'm in a really deep meditation, that means that again, when I think about that, I actually can't really have much words, because you just go into this deep silent all again. I was trying to, like, I can't really find the word. Do you know what I mean? Then you are in
yeah, I think that's the root of it, you know. It is there, and I think, yeah, I agree with you. I feel that I think we're all unraveling it, all of the. It's unfortunate because the English language has one word.
Yeah.
So, you know,
like Arabic languages have like so many words for the word.
Yeah. And so we, you know, have to unravel our delusions and fantasies and heroic kind of things. But I'm thinking more as that we're in the Vedas, when they say, when that which is unknown becomes known, you know, that glorious moment when everything that is interconnecting us is revealed. I feel that is love.
Well, I think love is like light, you know, and everything that is light is like darkness, for example, is only the absence of light, and hatred is only the absence of love. You know, so love is everything that is life, and anything that is not life is death. So it's kind of, love is everything, it's life itself. And it's and yeah, I think it's being more aware to, I think it's love is, you know, I mean, again,
and allowing others, isn't it? It's that freedom again of, you know, listening with your ears and your inner ear, and seeing with a deeper depth, and, you know, using your words carefully and all of these things, and using your sensual interaction with the world in a way that feels you know, as the Buddhists would say, tread lightly, you know, on the world, and allow life to happen through you, rather than, you know, you have the ojas, you have the rajasic energy and the fire, but allowing it to happen through you in the moments when it's genuinely there, and then in, you know, the moments of softer allowing themselves. Nicki, what is thriving to you? Because we're going to have to stop chatting shortly.
Yeah.
What is thriving to you? What, because you appear to be really in the effervescence kind of tree that is your life. You seem to be flourishing. So what would you say that is thriving?
I think thriving is to be more aware, more conscious, and more awake. And I think for me, you know, I you know, I've kind of I've been honing back my power in the last, you know, for whatever so reason. If we give our power away, generally, you know, whether that's emotional, energy, thought and attention, we can become more drained. And I think in the last even 2 years or a year for me, I've been just fully honing my own energy and power, and it's enabled me to just give all, just be so kind of filled, with my own kind of self-love and self-worth and creative energies, that it's available to be used. And I think when we become, say, emotionally anorexic or energetically anorexic, our cup is empty. We can't give anything to anyone else. We need to be filled, we need to be healed, we need to be replenished, we need to be nourished. And I think thriving is when you value your power, when you value your self-worth, and when you value your energy, and then it can be, your cup can then be filled to the point that it can overspill and give to others. And you can give to projects, you can give to your work, you can give to sentient beings around you. You have the energy to give. And I think that's what thriving is. Yeah.
Rooted in the self.
Yeah. And with your heart open and awake. I think, when you are being from the heart, you are thriving. When you're being from the mind or the ego, it's pretty dull. And it will be dead eventually. So just to always kind of shift one's awareness to the place of the heart, where they can just have this very light, childlike, innocent, but strong, confident, warrior-esque of a person. And that's to thrive, to stand in your own dignity, and to have self-esteem. I think that's really important. I think self-esteem, in a spiritual sense, is what thriving also is. Yeah.
And I would say that, from someone, again, on the outside looking in, you always present that. There's always a real dignity and graciousness and centeredness in the way that you present yourselves. And I really thank you for that, because as much as what you creatively put out there, I think, particularly in this day and age with social media, it's so lovely to see a woman standing in her presence and in a gracious way, so I really appreciate that. And thank you so much for chatting to me. And again, I will let everyone know all the work that you're up to and all the amazing people that you're working with. But personally, thank you so much for existing and sharing. And I'm sure that you have created a lot more ripples than you realise. And it was really, really lovely chatting with you today.
No, likewise, Ziba. Thank you so much.
And have a wonderful Christmas.
Yeah, to you too, with your family out there. I hope it's not too hot. Not Christmas tree season, but
really. I'll speak to you again soon.
Bye.
Bye.